Life will always bring you on a roller coaster ride. I'm navigating through each and every day and loving what is and what the future may hold. My past has given me amazing memories and untold stories, and at times feeling of worry and hardship, which I now see as part of my life journey. Remember, show up, and if you fail, that's okay. Tomorrow will bring a new day and new ideas. I've had the privilege to spend time and interview some amazing leaders over the years. As they share their stories of life and business, I find out what makes them the people they are. I'm honoured to share their stories with you. Donald, welcome to Breakthrough Brands, getting it wrong to get it right. How are you?
I'm great. Down here in southern part of the United States in New Orleans.
Well, perfect place. I can see you sitting on the veranda drinking iced lemon tea. That's what I'm visualizing.
It's really a hurricane.
Well, yeah, we're having that here. Summer, we're in the height of summer. The longest daylight day is starting to coming up now very shortly. It's the first summer that I've ever said that it got so hot the other day, I nearly took my jumper off. So, yeah, it's been cold. But Donald, the reason why I'm asking you on, I came across your book, Screw It Up. You're a man that has walked many paths, worn many hats. You're an entrepreneur, you're a business owner, and as most of our listeners are business owners and entrepreneurs, we all have skeletons in our closet. For you, you followed your father's footsteps. You had some terrible problems within business. There was a lot of stuff that went on through your life, theft, backstabbing. There was even stuff about drugs, and all the other stuff can happen to some people. But the one thing that we all live with when we are trying to grow and develop a business is uncertainty. And the reason why I've asked you on the show, because you're a man who's in his 70s, and I feel that you'll offer some great value and wisdom to a younger generation. And that younger generations of people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. Because we're always learning. Sometimes we just kind of need to get out of our own way, and we need to figure out what's working, what's not working, and what parts of the business we can really focus on. So welcome to the show. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Tell me, you followed in your father's footsteps. Let's start with there. How did life look when you followed your father's footsteps in the beginning?
Well, my dad was working with his dad in the import-export business. And on one trip, he was in an airport and picked up a magazine and saw a franchise opportunity for United Rentals. So he took part of the family, I think the sister right above me up, I was too young at the time, and went to Nebraska to look at this franchise, came back and said, I can do this by myself and don't have to pay that many royalties. So in 1955, he opened up his first American rental location in the ground floor apartment next to the racetrack here in New Orleans. I'm the only one of 8 kids we all worked in the business at some point, but I was the only one who went in full time after I graduated from Loyola here in New Orleans and made it a career. By the time I was working through high school and college, he had 7 locations, and I helped him build it to 17 locations. We were well known in the industry. The Charbonnet family was. Dad and I were both directors for the American Rental Association, which is a national trade association for equipment rental, not only construction, but event rentals also. And we were the largest owner of chairs and tables inventory in Louisiana. We had 10,000 chairs and 1,000 tables. And, we had to grow in order to support his family and my family. So most everybody's pretty much grown at this point. When I go in, had 3 younger sisters, but all went different directions. And so it was fun. Dad loved real estate, and he would find a good location and would open up a rental store. So he was building up his value in his personal portfolio in real estate. And so I was supporting that real estate by running rental companies. So he kind of took a backseat in day-to-day operations, and I ran everything pretty much day-to-day, traveling, visiting all the rental stores, checking the inventories, ordering inventory, and just, helping manage the business. And he handled the finance side, and I handled the operation side. And what happened to the business is that we had a big order for chairs and tables in the New Orleans Superdome back then, I'm talking mid 80s. And it was for the Lions Club. The crew went in the morning, delivered, and they went back to pick up at about 6 o'clock when the thing had ended. I was having dinner with my dad. It was actually his birthday, January the 6th. And I got home, and this was before cell phones. And my lead guy called me and said, "Mr. D, we got a problem." He said, "You got to come to the Superdome." So I went down there, and everything had kind of stopped, all the pickup and stacking of the chairs and tables. One of our men had gone up into the stands and smoked what is called a clickum. And a clickum is a marijuana cigarette dipped in formaldehyde. And when smoked, it gives them a PCP effect. Well, he smoked it, jumped in a truck. We're inside the dome now. Okay, there's not a football field, there's just chairs and tables. And he drove around the inside of the dome and ran over 12 people. And one lady was pinned under the truck. He opened the door, just walked away like nothing had happened. And obviously security came and grabbed him and locked him. They actually have jail cells in the dome. And at the time, once the dust had settled, we got sued for $10 million, and we had $1 million worth of insurance. So we were advised to put the company in Chapter 11 bankruptcy, so they couldn't take it. And as the year or two progressed, the administration fees with lawyers and everything had gotten so big, we couldn't see our way out. And so I left the company with the new investor and got ready to open 4 locations. When I was ready with new inventory, we emptied 4 locations and then restocked with new equipment all in one weekend. And then we filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy, and that kind of got us out of the lawsuit. And the Superdome and the Lions Club had, deeper wells than our company did. And so we ended up getting dismissed. And one lady, unfortunately, was an invalid for life. And I'm sure she's way long gone by now. But that's how we lost the business. And that's when my career kind of started taking a whole new avenue, so to speak. After a year with the new investor, he and my dad had a disagreement. And so he let us both go. So I was divorced with 3 kids, personal bankruptcy, business bankruptcy, living in a small apartment, didn't own a car. I was using a car that my dad had. And life was not real pretty at that time. Talked to an old friend of mine who was in the business, and he said, let's meet. And we had a 3-hour interview. He was about an hour south of New Orleans and had 7 locations. And when I left that meeting, this is a true story. When I left that meeting, I was stopped at a red light, and I just thought to myself, you're divorced, 3 kids in an apartment, you don't have a car, your business bankrupt, your personal bankrupt, you just lost a company you helped started. What else can go wrong? And Joe, at that moment, smoke started coming out from under the hood. And I said, God, I didn't think you were listening that close. So anyway, that's when I jumped ship and went to work for this other gentleman, Robert Buckner, all the way. So that was the beginning of a long roller coaster ride for the next 30-something years.
Tell me this. You seem to, I'm guessing you had a good relationship with your father.
Absolutely. I was the only one to work with him for 20 years.
What values did you learn from him?
Number one was work ethic and honesty, and mainly treat everybody the same. In the equipment rental business, you don't have to go to the president of a construction company to get their business to rent them equipment. Sometimes you got to go to the maintenance supervisor, or project manager. So you got to be able to deal with people on every level in any type of business. And I think that's what I've been known for throughout my career is how I treat people.
When the unfortunate accident happened, or the crime that was committed, and that young man caused so much heartache to a lot of people, for yourselves as in the business, you must have kind of felt this is over. All those things that rush through our heads when something happens. And then you have to step back and go, okay, how do we get out of that? It must have been a very unsettling time for yourselves.
My life was a shambles, to be honest with you. I didn't know. The only thing I had done for 20 years at that point was the equipment rental business. So that's when I started calling people to see if they needed anybody. And my biggest fear is that what if nobody wants to hire me? And it's just a time to change direction of my whole life, having the skills that the equipment rental business teaches you, everything from logistics and purchasing and sales and marketing and all those different things. I didn't know if I was going to have to start a new career or not. And I was very fortunate that I really didn't have to. But I got to tell you, there were some gut wrenching moments in there. Especially going through a divorce at the time and three kids. The thing is, I knew I had to support the kids, whatever I did, and that was my number one focus.
Depression and anxiety can grip people, especially when things that are happening that they feel are outside of their own world. And, we, as business owners, and when, for you, when you're in that situation, I'm sure you kind of had moments of feeling depressed because you knew what life could be like and it wasn't like that.
Oh, yeah. I thought I was set for life with the family business. The problem is that you never know what's around the corner, as you kind of indicated earlier, that things can change quickly. But, what I've learned throughout my career is never give up. The book is titled Screw You. The comeback is always stronger than the setback. And so I've had many setbacks, but I've always come back and oftentimes better than the setback was. But at moments when you're either let go for reasons beyond your control or wasn't your fault or whatever, with backstabbing and personality conflicts, you got to keep going. I mean, you got to pull those boots back on and say, where's the next mountain I got to climb?
Yeah, it's really sort of being able to look at everything and not let anything really stress you out, but also being able to make those decisions, even if it's a real bad one, to go, okay, everything's not working out as planned, and I'm here in this moment right now. And the thing that I advise people when I'm coaching them, I say to them, said, look, pretend you have a big red button and you press the button and it makes a big noise. And that's giving you to start right now as a new start today, no matter what it is. And the biggest question that you can ask yourself is, what can I do right now in this very moment to change things?
Right. I mean, one of the things I found is networking, and, don't burn any bridges along the way, because you never know when you're going to need that person. As much as you may hate them at the moment, you never know when your career might cross paths again. And that actually happened to me when I was at Buckner Rental. I actually had to move to Houma, which was tough. Not seeing my kids every day. I was hired as a sales manager, and 3 months later, general manager of the company. And 3 years later, when we sold to a private equity group, I became president of the company and helped take it from 7 to 27 locations with the help of private equity. But those were tough days, and a lot of travel and meeting people and getting them comfortable with you and the company that you represent along the way.
But was that the case then, that the company was going to be sold and you were suddenly demoted? Was that
Yes.
company?
Yeah. Well, so I helped when I signed the last purchase agreement. We bought a 5-location business in South Texas, and working late one evening, the then CEO, when I was president, when we were building the company to sell it. Okay. And the investors had said, as president, you'll get a bonus of $600,000 when we sell this company. So you can imagine that I was working my ass off to make sure everything went well. Well, 2 months before we put it on the market, the then CEO that got moved up and the former owner pulled me in and said, "You're not president anymore. Well, you can create a position." I've created chief administrative officer. And then he gave the sales manager my position, which also gave him $600,000, and I got 3. You can imagine, I'd remarried at the time, but I was really counting on that money. I could have paid cash for a house instead of struggling with a mortgage for many years after taxes and down payments on houses and things like that. But that guy who became president over me many years later called me and asked me to go to work for him in the company he was running, because he knew the job that I could do in managing and growing a company. And he was in the man camp business in the shale industry with a Canadian company that had bought the local company in Louisiana. And so at the time, I'd been, I want to make sure I get my facts right, but after Katrina, I opened up another rental company. And after 4 years, had a run in with an investor. He thought he knew everything about the business, and I didn't know squat. And so I walked away from that company. 2 months later, had triple bypass surgery, thanks to my wife demanding I go get a physical under the stress that I had been under. And then I finally got back on my feet and I went to work for a company selling forklifts. One of the customers I was calling on asked me to go to work for him in the diesel engine business. So after a year, I jumped to him. And then after a year of that, this guy, Billy, was actually had an office down the street from where I was working. And he called me and said, come work for me. And each one was a different progression up. And with the third one, I was back in management again and making good money rather than door-to-door salesman for a forklift or diesel engines. So you can appreciate you would have jumped at that chance too.
Yeah. It seems that your career after, a family business, your career then meanders. And one of the things which I'm learning from yourself is courage, because most people, when they're in a position and something goes wrong, they let pride take over, which then stops them doing other jobs because they feel that they're beneath them.
Right. Well, I never thought I'd be a salesman selling forklifts door to door, looking for overhead doors and pallets. I can tell you that.
Yeah. Tell me this. What would you have done differently? Looking back on your business career, what would you have done differently, knowing what you know now?
Well, it's a difficult question because, when you're forced to do things that you didn't think that you were going to have to do, and you're at the hands of your career's at the hands of someone else, I just finished an interesting book by a gentleman by the name of Matt Higgins, and it's called Burn the Boats. I don't know if you've ever heard of that or not.
Yeah, I know the
well, it's kind of based on the Greek generals from years ago when they would arrive ashore in the boats, and he would say to the crew, "Burn the boats."
Yeah,
and that was so. Guess what, guys? We either win or we're going to die because we can't retreat. And so retreat has never been in my vocabulary. You can't just stop. And I even have a brother who stopped working years ago and did a little stint with me in one of the companies, but I could never see how he didn't have the drive that our dad had put in us to keep going. I mean, even when dad left the rental business with the investor, then he continued on. He was selling dental insurance, to big groups and stuff, and he died of a massive heart attack one night. So, the thing is, as I said earlier, you never know what's around the corner, but whatever it is, you can't give up. You got to keep pushing forward. And that's just the way that I was raised. Been through a lot of crazy stuff, in my career, but I'm happier today than I've ever been working for myself in mergers and acquisitions inside the equipment rental business. And a friend of mine years ago told me, Donald, there's more money to be made in the equipment rental industry than there is being in the business and running it day to day.
Yeah, there's something, listening to your story and about your father. Do you know did you ever watch the play or read the book called Death of a Salesman?
Many, many, many moons ago.
Yeah. Bookie. I wonder, did your father, after having a great successful business and then going into selling stuff and looking at, did he sometimes feel that he missed something?
Well, I'm not sure, what he missed. I'm sure he had his moments of distress and anxiety and depression also, Fortunately,
Yes.
When he slowed down, all the kids were grown,
Yeah.
and
I don't think people don't realize or understand the amount of businesses that are created on a yearly basis and how many fail in the first, second, or third year. And it's usually because of don't know the market or run out of money. But for years, it was unfortunate a circumstance of an insurance and someone foul play that caused that. So the business probably would have went into a completely different direction if that accident didn't happen.
Oh
So
yeah.
everything was there to make it a successful business. What do you think is the greatest gift that someone who is starting a business or running a business can have? Is it intuition? Is it the ability to make decisions? Is it to become a great salesperson? What do you think it is?
Well, Joe, I think it's all those things put together. I'm working on an article right now and calling it hats. And the reason I chose the name hats is because of all the different hats an entrepreneur wears. And to get a business started, you got to be a banker, you got to be an advertiser, you got to be a manager, you got to be a purchaser, you got to do all these different things to make your dream what you hope it will be. And yeah, there's tons of businesses that fail shortly. I think sometimes it's for lack of capital or lack of focus or direction or culture that you create in your own business as you grow it to keep good people and surround yourself with good people. And sometimes they might be smarter than you. But one of the things that I've learned is I think one of the key things for anybody in business is that you have to learn to listen to what other people say. So you listen, then you think, and then you respond, you know. And I took a test years ago when I worked for this other friend of mine, Robert. It was called the Colby test. And what the test, there was five of us who took it, and I was the only one of the five working for him that was in the right position. And it said basically that I was a researcher and that I like to gather all the facts before I make a decision on something. So I mean, what's that one key thing? I don't know if it's any one key thing other than drive and passion for what you're doing, It's
Yeah, I
just
think it's the
many things.
belief. I think you have to have a belief. I was speaking to a client there this morning, and we were going through, walking him through a sales process and what he needs to do in to develop the sales process so we can close deals. And I said, like, one of the things you have to have as well is enthusiasm, and you have to believe that what you are selling is the best service that you can offer to your client as well. So I think for your drive, like you could have gone, oh, right, I'm throwing in the towel and I'm going to work in Walmart and I'm just going to
Right.
work in Walmart. But you chose not to because you have that, I'm guessing, that entrepreneurial spirit and you had that drive, and Walmart wouldn't have been acceptable for you. You needed to go out, and even one step at a time, even if it's a struggle, you're doing the right thing. But questioning, am I doing the right thing, is probably where you went all along the road as well. Would I be right about
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. I mean, you're first of all in your business, you have to be the head cheerleader. Okay, you bring the enthusiasm and everything to everybody else around you and to your clients also. And I'm gonna tell you about the craziest thing I did throughout this whole ordeal of my career. After I left one of the companies I was with, I ran into an old friend. We had a great conversation, and he said, come in and talk to me." He was in the pre-need funeral insurance business in the United States and Canada, and his COO was leaving him, and he said, "Why don't you come in and take this position?" So I was managing a company I'd so far out of the box from what I had done in the past, but it's really just dealing with people, and that's the biggest skill I think anybody can have is just dealing with people, and it was a huge business. I think I read a year ago that he had crossed $3 billion in sales for pre-need funeral. And the irony there for me is that what's the one thing that is associated with funeral homes? It's the same stuff that's called formaldehyde, and it's the same thing that marijuana cigarette was dipped into that caused us to lose the business. Not that I was running a funeral home, but just being in that industry and knowing that this is a chemical that is used in embalming and stuff like that, and thinking back to Jesus, that's what caused my business. Why? This is just kind of crazy, a big wake up moment. And I said, I hope something else comes along because I just don't know how much I can do this.
Yeah, you know, for anyone that knows me, they know that I have a strong faith. And sometimes I even feel that the wrong stuff that comes along is brought to us as for us as a guide to teach us, and for us to really also let go and trust that whatever we're doing, we know we're meant to be where we're meant to be, and all we can do is move forward and get it right, and
Listen,
things will get better and better if
yeah,
because you have that. Do not be afraid.
I tell people all the time, I said, you got to look at the front windshield and not the rear view mirror, because
Yeah.
whatever happened in the past, you got to run away from it. And your character is built not just for when you fall, but how you get up and keep running, because we're all going to fall.
We are, and fall many times. It's a life lesson. Um,
Let's not have a contest, okay?
yeah, yeah, that's it. I've fed of falling. Tell me this now. You said something to me when we were speaking there a couple of months ago that your business now is better in the industry that you're in than all the other industries or all the other businesses that you've had or worked in.
Yes. Well, let me tell you how I got into the merger and acquisition business. And there's a chapter in my book that talks about my good friend Travis, and I have a son that was having some legal problems and was in a work release program. I called him to see, because he was in work release down in Houma, Louisiana, and I called Travis to see if he needed anybody, in his paint yard or fabrication yard or whatever. He said, no, but Sharp, I've been looking for you. My nickname was Sharp for him. And said, come have lunch with me. And I went, and he was in the pipeline maintenance business, a company called Marlin Services. He had the oil and gas pipeline maintenance. He had blasting and painting and fabrication. And he says, I want you to come help me grow this business. I was out of a job. This was like a godsend. And that's why I got, the book says about, always take care of your family. I was trying to take care of my son, and it all came back to me instead of him. I went in there as a COO. He had one location doing $13 million. He says, I want to build it 5 years and sell it. I said, let's go. So I did some research. I opened a branch in Texas. I bought a company in Alabama. I took over a company in Mississippi and took it from 13 to 62 million in 3 years. Then we had some private equity people come and buy the company, and he remained the CEO and I remained the COO. And then he had a falling out with the investors, and they let him go, and I became CEO of the company. And then after, I guess, about a year, they came to me and said, we're going to bring somebody in and take your place. But first, I want you to fire the other two founders of the business. I said, well, for a year's pay, I'll do that. And so I talked to him first before I had the meeting with the equity people to say that I had to let him go, and they understood. And so I left, and I wrote the book. I did a podcast, the first ever podcast for the equipment rental industry, called Rental Equip Talk Radio. I did that until the pandemic hit, and then all the advertising dollars fell apart because nobody wanted to spend any money. And then as the pandemic started to end, a friend of mine in the insurance business came to me and said, look, we're starting a merger and acquisition company. And it's two gentlemen who sold insurance to the equipment rental industry and another one who's an attorney, and said, you close deals or you bring deals, we'll give you a piece of the pie and all that kind of thing. Well, the first one that I brought in was a 5-location company doing about $50 million a year, and signed them up. And if I brought them to the table and sold them, my commission would be much better, obviously, it'd be double. So after close to a year, the attorney and the seller had a little falling out. And so said all deals are off. And so a year had passed, and I kept working for the guy. I told him, I said, look, I'll cut the commission in half of what they were going to charge you, because I'm the only one who's really working on this business. The insurance guys couldn't really represent anybody, but they needed somebody who could handle the logistics. And I had done this in growing the other two companies that I had done. So after, I decided to leave them, and said they weren't bringing in the leads that I really was hoping for. And so I said, I could do this by myself. So I'd always had kind of a side consulting company called Charbonnet Consulting. And so I put a LLC together called Charbonnet Enterprises and went to work and started marketing myself, to the industry. I ended up selling that $50 million company. Then I sold a $30 million company. Then I sold two $10 million companies. And this was in 21 and 22. So I finally had more financial freedom than I'd ever had in my life. I didn't have a mortgage anymore. Student loans were gone, car notes were gone, everything. I mean, I really have been in a great position for the last 3.5 years. So 23 was kind of a dry year, but it was a building year. So right now I have like $50 million of companies under contract, and I still have 5 more companies I'm trying to sell on top of that. So I'm just enjoying life, to be honest with you. I'm working at my pace, out of my house, in my pajamas most of the time, because everything is done with phone calls and emails. And it's just the relationships that you build in an industry that people start trusting you.
Yeah, I say to people, everything is about language, communication, and influence. And the way the world, like you say you're in your pajamas. For me, I do a lot of my work in the countryside here in Ireland, but I deal with a lot of companies in the US. And it is at your own pace. And it's not about killing yourself. It's about enjoying the life that we have. Tell me, what, in your opinion, or what advice would you give to the listeners about people that want to build a business, scale a business? What do you look for when you kind of, for those people say, look, I'm bringing you in to grow this business. What do you look for? What do you do?
I would say keep your eye on the ball, so to speak. Don't lose focus of your initial game plan. But if there's a roadblock, sometimes you have to alter your plan to make it work. And I've seen this in a lot of companies. I know people who used to rent construction equipment and tools that changed to go into the event rental business of tents and chairs and tables and china and glassware and all that kind of thing. Along those lines, I think one of the biggest things you have to do in your company is to teach people to think for themselves instead of coming to you for every answer and response. And the way that I would do that is that when somebody would come to me with a problem, I would say, "What would you do if I wasn't here?" And let them think about, as a manager, do I have to call the owner every time to make a decision? And it's that process of getting people to think for themselves that can help accelerate a business without having to go through 2 channels of management to get an answer, And sometimes what they would do is not always the right thing, but it's a learning experience, and say, that's a great idea, but I think in this case, we need to do it this way. What do you think about it? And ask other people's opinion and not be the one with all the answers all the time. People in the trenches who are dealing with the day-to-day sometimes have a better idea than a senior manager who's sitting behind a desk somewhere.
Yeah, I always say to, come to me with a solution, not a
Right.
problem.
Right.
Yeah. And
then
that
we can talk
helps.
about it.
Yeah. And what I learned over the years is if you give someone the go ahead, say someone comes to you with a solution, you say, right, go with it. And if it works out, they're hailed a hero and they think they're brilliant. But if it goes wrong, you get to blame. But you were in that position to take the blame, and you go, well, take that. But what you're doing is you're developing their thinking process for them to get better as well. Because if they come to you with the idea and it's rubbish, you go, oh no, I don't think we'll do that. But if you think it's good, go run with it. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Decision making makes us move forward all the time. You are now in an industry, you're in a business you love, you're enjoying it. What's next for you? Is it just, kicking back and enjoying life?
Yeah, I mean, I can work at the pace that I want to. If I put 1 or 2 deals a year together, 24 is going to be the biggest year I've ever had. I make more money than I did in the previous 10 years combined. And so I got to love what I'm doing, right? But if there's some days that I don't have anybody that I'm working with to sell a company, yeah, I can kick back. I'm knocking on 74 next month and have more time with my wife, who's also just recently retired for the second time, and just enjoy life and try to spend more time with my family, maybe do some traveling and stuff. But, not having all the financial worries and woes is a huge lift off of anybody's shoulders.
Yeah. I
And
think,
that's why people buy the Powerball tickets here,
I think that I often think that people will go out and they'll buy things just to fill a gap. And I think as we get older and more comfortable with ourselves, we enjoy our own solitude. We also have to go and forgive the past as well. And relationships come more important, those close relationships as well, because they get fewer and fewer as we get older. But it's also being able to recognize the joys in life. As someone once said to me, life is a shit show, but the small things in life that make us smile are worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think, Joe, another thing along those lines is health.
Health, yeah.
If you have more time to take better care of yourself, I used to drive 1,000 miles a week, I was working, 10, 12 hours a day. And a lot of those things and a lot of stress has caused me problems over the years. I've had over 30 minor couple of major surgeries, but I've had a bunch of minor ones. At one point, they actually had to cut chronic inflammation, which is caused by stress, out of both of my hands at different times and several fingers that just got swollen. And the doctor says, "What do you do?" And you tell him, and he says, "Dude, you need to slow down because you're working on yourself, killing yourself, basically, by creating all these medical issues that you have."
Yeah, it's the biggest killer. A question that a lot of people will ask me, after this interview. So we might. What, in your opinion, do you think companies look for when they want to buy a company? Because we deal with a lot of companies who are getting ready to exit. Someone's been in the business a long time and they kind of go, we want to get out of this business in the next 3 to 5 years. What do you think buyers look for when they're looking for a company?
Well, I think it's got to be the right industry. I spend a lot of time on these different websites for companies for sale and looking for other rental companies, and then try to work with the listing broker on a finder's fee basis if I bring them to a successful buyer. And that in its own right comes from my research background, that I've always going to dig to find more. But I think that in my industry, it's got to be the right mix of equipment. Like, there's still a lot of consolidation going on right now in the rental industry, but nobody wants to buy event rental companies. It's all in the construction side, because they can look at the future construction work that is always promoted and tracked and all that kind of thing, and know that construction in that area is going to need a lot of construction equipment. The biggest company in the industry now is United Rentals, doing about, I think, $13 billion out of 1,400 locations. And I work with the head of their M&A department, as well as I do with Sunbelt Rentals, who's another large company out of the UK that's big, 1,200 locations. I deal with these bigger guns who are still looking for other rental companies to buy. It's not so much the culture of that company that they're looking for, although that's a big thing moving forward, because they're going to put in their own systems and management along the way anyway. So they want to look at what the customer base is, make sure that there's not one customer that's a majority of the revenue that's coming in. If one customer has 20% of the rental company's business, they're really not that excited about that. But if you got companies that don't do more than 5% of the overall revenue, then that's normal. That's good.
Yeah.
Because if you lose one customer, you're screwed.
Yeah, it's people depend, as organizations depend on a small amount of customers, and if they lose one of them, they're snookered. I always say to clients, I said, look, before you get bigger, we need to get better, and you need to get really good at what you're doing. And those processes, you need to have a great system, you need to have a great process, you need to have wonderful behaviors, and you also need to have measurement within your organization. But if you get really good at what you're doing, you'll come very attractive to someone if they want to buy you later on.
Yeah. One of the things that I get my sellers to do is to leave the building and come back with the eyes of a customer and see, what does this place look like from the outside? Is it clean? Is it neat? Is it orderly? Is the equipment lined up? Is the service area full of oily rags and big oil spots all over the floor environmentally? So before I bring a buyer in, I want to make sure that they're comfortable with the way their company looks from an outsider. And I mean, I can remember my dad way back in the day, there was an outside service that he would hire and said, go rent something from this branch and then write me a report, and then I reimburse you for, maybe it was an appliance dolly or a sewer snake or something off the wall. And he would get reports, and he would see how the manager was doing, how the customer felt the facility looked, and was he treated courteously. I don't know about y'all in Ireland, but here I can leave a doctor's office and within 12 hours, I'm getting a survey, and it's all about, were you treated with care and kindness? Was the facility clean? And all these self-surveys from an independent people to go back and tell the doctor's office, how a patient felt about visiting their place, and I'm big about waiting too long. You got 3:30 appointment and the guy sees you at 4:30.
I think the one thing that you have to really focus on is customer service.
Yeah.
That experience, because people vote with their feet. Especially in the digital age, people are keyboard warriors or will say or do whatever. But I think it's I always believe, treat people the way you want to be treated.
Absolutely.
And if you just focus on that, everything else then will work. And it's not about just going, oh, we're sorry. It's going above and beyond what their expectations are if you screw up.
Yeah.
On it.
I'll give you an example of that, Joe. In this industry, you might have 10 different companies to rent something from in one market. And so, and I've said this in other podcasts that I've been on before, but when a piece of equipment goes down, that's when customer service really counts. I mean, I've seen people go on a job site and the project manager say, yeah, that scissor lift's been down for a day and a half, and they still haven't come out to see about it. Okay. My philosophy is that you treat a service call like a medical emergency, even if you got to put an ambulance light on your service truck. And look, although I've been in the industry around for 50 years and I bought millions of dollars worth of equipment, I'm probably one of the most unmechanical people that you'll ever meet in your life. Like, how do you even start this thing? Okay. Because I've been a manager in senior management so long. But the last company that I had after Katrina, we actually got a service call on a Sunday night. And so I grabbed a couple of tools from my shed and went out to the job site at 10 o'clock at night, just so that the customer knew that we were there attending to something. This was a reach forklift in the middle of the street. And, I didn't know from Adam, but I kept looking around and flashlighting and this and that and this and that. And said, I think it needs this part, but, I have to check in the morning to see if we can get it. And then I sent the real mechanic out.
Hitting it with a hammer.
With a hammer, right.
I worked in the motor industry, and, I always believed that the customer came first. And a story like that, I wouldn't know the inside of the engine of a car. For me to look at an engine would be looking down the throat of a cow to tell you how good the steaks were, but you'd have a look because it's that reassurance as well. So yeah, I think it's, and then years later when I got out of the trade, I'd people still calling me to ask me, could I refer someone to them, because they trust. It's trust. It's all about trust on it.
Well, I used to tell my group that we're really in the keeping people working business.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you got an excavator and a hydraulic line busts, and you got typically five guys looking at the job site, one doing all the work and the other is a safety, another supervisor, blah, blah, blah. And if the project manager comes and sees all these guys standing around doing nothing, that's when he's going to get upset. And that's how you lose business.
That's where we have the government county councils here, one guy digging a hole and 7 guys standing around leaning on their shovels.
Yeah, same here.
It's Donald, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions before we wrap it up here.
Sure.
What did you get wrong to get right?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I don't know that things that I did were wrong to get right, as much as it was, something went wrong and I had to make it right for me and my family. So, several of the positions I lost were no fault of my own, but were other people's misunderstandings of things. And, I took a stint with the local Caterpillar dealer, opened up 7 locations from scratch for him. And over 3.5 years, Caterpillar was pushing their dealers to have a true rental program with all types of items, not just dirt equipment. And Caterpillar Corporate came in to do an audit of the division I had built for these guys. And after 4 days, we had a big meeting with the owners. And the person from Caterpillar kind of started out by saying, y'all got one of the best programs I've seen. We've done 25 of these audits, and Donald has brought you everything that you should have. But you all as owners are doing everything wrong. And I tried to tell him that several months before. Their report was just like the report I'd given the president of the company. And the next day, I'm at lunch with my branch manager and my general service manager, and I said, fellas, this is the last supper. I said, what do you mean? I said, if you think that so-and-so is going to stand for being ridiculed and look bad in front of a group of people, you're crazy. 20 minutes later, when we're back, he came in and let me go. And I had done nothing wrong. And I had proof that I had done nothing wrong.
Tell the truth.
The irony of that is that was a Friday. That Monday, the National Trade Show for the American Rental Association opened in Anaheim, California. And I'm on the cover of one of the biggest trade magazines in the industry about the company I just built for these guys. I'm on the freaking cover. And I went because I put a business plan together over the weekend to see if I could go get some capital and equipment. And I walked into one booth and the guy says, hey, you're this guy. I said, yeah, but I'm not there anymore. So talk about getting it wrong to make it right.
Yeah. Well, tell me this, what's the best piece of business advice that you would offer to listeners?
To listen and think and then respond. You got to hear your employees, you got to hear your customers, you got to hear your vendors and listen to what they're saying instead of just blurting out everything that you say is great without really knowing what they might be trying to tell you to make yourself and your company better. Yeah. So I'm really big on listening before I speak and thinking about all the various things you could respond and what are going to be the effects of those things that you say and who you're saying them to.
And, don't be frightened. Your book, Screw You, it's like the comeback king. Comeback is always stronger than the setback. And I agree with you on that. And, anyone that wants to check out that book can find it on Amazon.
Thank you for that.
If someone wants to reach out to you as well, they can find you on LinkedIn.
Yes.
I know you're on LinkedIn. Want to give them your LinkedIn profile there?
Well, it's just under my name, Donald Charbonnet. I have my own website, donaldcharbonnet.com. That'll tell you a lot about my background and history and other things you may or may not want to know.
And Charbonnet is a French name, so
Yes.
you're connecting to the European aspect of it as well. Yeah. Donald, I'm going to just touch on one thing. As the show is breakthrough brands, it's getting it right to get it wrong. In sales, what advice would you give those companies that want to grow their sales? Do you believe the phone is the best, part of picking up and making those calls, or do you believe it's networking? What do you feel is your greatest tool? There's the question. Your greatest tool that you use.
That's a simple answer for me. I learned it from a friend of mine in Fort Worth, Texas, and he drew it. And so I can't draw it for you, but figure 2 curves looking at each other with a little dot in the middle of them. And he would put STP 10 a day. And what that meant was see the people, so many a day, belly to belly. Go see people face to face, eye to eye, look them in the eye. I used to use the term, we'd be honored to have your business. And when you put honor in there, it changes everything. That you mean that much to me that I would use the word honor.
Yeah.
but face to face, belly to belly. And I never forgot that statement that my buddy Don told me. And
Yeah.
he built two great businesses, rental businesses, and sold each of them. He built, sold, waited, went back in, built again, and then sold again.
Yeah. I, it's when I'm asked occasionally, what's the best business advice you can give a business, they spend wisely.
Spend wisely.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and make sure that you're putting in those efforts to make those calls, to reach people, to speak to them. Because you may have the most brilliant business in the world, but if nobody knows that you exist, it's only a
Yeah,
brilliant business to you, no one else.
that's right.
Yeah.
And the other part of that in running a successful business is that the financial side of it is that you got to put in tools that, you know, what you can measure, you can manage. And so knowing details of if the salesman's being productive or not productive. So if it's not working, cut bait, start over again, and don't let somebody else drag down the reputation of you and your business.
Yeah. As we say, there's no such great marketers. There's just great testers.
Yeah,
It's test, tweak, test until you get it right.
right.
Donald, thank you for coming on to the show. It's been an absolute pleasure. As I say, I reckon if anyone is looking for that true grit, the true essence of, a man's story and how a business, how a man just keeps, brushing off the dust and now is living that successful life. I think it's definitely a book that's worth reading. So I'd like to thank you for coming on to the show.
I appreciate it. I really enjoyed it, Joe, and got to stay in touch. Okay.
Are you struggling to grow your business? Book a free business growth consultation with Joe today. In this consultation, you'll receive professional advice, step-by-step guidance that will help you achieve success, best practices and tips for improving profits.